Goku is a character that gets simplified a lot when talked about, which is really unfortunate since he's a lot more complex than people make him out to be. It's actually kind of interesting to think about. Before, all I ever heard was that he was a Superman clone and was pretty boring overall. But all I seem to hear nowadays is that he's a selfish asshole who'd do anything to have a good fight. While I understand how these interpretations formed, in the original manga, Goku was neither of these. He's never strictly been a hero of justice or a fighting maniac at any point in his life. He may have leaned towards one or the other from time to time, but at his core, he's a mixture of the two, and that's what I find so fascinating about him. He's a person pulled by two different worlds, but instead of choosing one over the other, he tries to find his own middle ground. A place where he's able to fulfill his duties as Earth's defender while still being happy, satisfying his desires to fight. This is something he develops and refines over time, though, because at the start of the series, Goku has no such duty, or any kind of desire for that matter. When he leaves with Bulma on their quest, he does so on a whim. Yeah, seeing a dragon is cool, but unlike Bulma, he doesn't really want anything from it, and is fully willing to leave to help someone out. This isn't to say he gets nothing out of this adventure, though. While his grandpa raised him to be a good kid and told him stories of the outside world, Goku never really had an interest in seeing any of it on his own and was perfectly content in his little corner. Thanks to Bulma, however, he was finally able to experience it all for himself and absolutely loves it. The adventure, the action, all the cool people and places he visits. His young open mind is finally seeing what his world has to offer, and by the end has a lot more options to choose from than he's ever had before. Maybe he can go with Bulma and live the city life, maybe he can continue exploring the world and have an adventurous lifestyle, or maybe he can just go home and not really bother with it all. His life can go in any number of directions, but to him, his path is clear. He wants to get stronger, and so he goes to live with the Muten Roshi, starting his journey as a martial artist. Goku began the arc wanting nothing, but ends it with a desire that will stick with him for the rest of his life. Being the child that he is, though, it's up to the Muten Roshi to make sure he stays on that path, which he does an amazing job at. While the impact he had on Goku won't be immediately apparent, it's clear later on just how much his teaching shaped him. His sense of humility, understanding the value of hard work, and desire to be the best version of himself that he can be. You can argue that in some ways Goku was always like this, after all, this is the path he chose, but the level of understanding, dedication, and passion he'll end up having for this craft is what he gains here. Without the Muten Roshi and the Budokais, he probably would have still liked fighting, sure, but can we really say he would have ended up refining it the same way he does in the actual series? With the same level of humility and focus? Muten Roshi won't be the only one responsible for this, but he laid a great foundation for Goku to walk on, and as such, he and this arc play an important part of his life. The Red Ribbon Army arc takes a bit of a detour from Goku's growth as a martial artist, but in return fully showcases the other side of his character, his heroism. Now, he isn't a full-blown superhero, he won't actively hunt down evildoers or look for people to save, but he's always been a good person with the power to defend the innocent, so regardless, evildoers like the Red Ribbon Army are going to be threats he'll come into contact with on a regular basis. The arc itself is pretty straightforward with this. Goku just sort of helps out whenever he can and stops any bad guys in his way. However, there are a few interesting scenes that put him in some pretty precarious positions. They don't really amount to much here, but nevertheless show us just how naive and thoughtless Goku is in more gray situations, which will change as the series progresses. One fundamental aspect of his that will never change, however, is an attempt to make the best of both worlds, which the ending of the arc perfectly encapsulates. Sure, he'd willingly give up the 4-star ball to revive Upa's father, but that doesn't mean he isn't going to try and snatch it before it gets away. If he can do the right thing and satisfy his desires as well, he'll try to do both, which we'll see time and time again. The 22nd Budokai will shift back into Goku's martial arts journey and is where we start seeing all of his teachings pay off. While he didn't seem to get it at the time, it's clear that he internalized both Roshi and Karin's teachings. I didn't mention Karin earlier because his training was essentially the same idea-wise as the Muten Roshis, but that isn't to say it wasn't important. Even though both were the same in spirit, it reinforced the benefits of hard, honest work in Goku's mind, which we see really stuck with him. He knows now that if he really wants to develop and hone his strength to the best of his abilities, he'll need to work hard for it and focus. He can't just go about it as freely and as recklessly as he did before. He's going to need to give it his all, which he does. His demeanor here in the 22nd Budokai is far more serious than the previous one. If you actually look at Goku in the 21st Budokai, he was pretty laid back about the whole thing. He nearly slept past his match, he had to use Quinton to not get out of bounds, and just kinda winged it for the majority of the tournament. He was still incredibly strong, quick to learn new moves, and sometimes tricked his opponents, sure, but for the most part he was just playing it by ear and didn't really take it all too seriously. In the 22nd Budokai, though, that clearly isn't the case. He's looking for openings, made sure to cover his weak points, observed his opponent's techniques to overcome them later on, and is optimizing as best as he can. He ultimately doesn't win because of bad luck, but the dedication and growth he shows here is clear as day, and he'll continue to sharpen his skills as the series progresses. The Piccolo Daimao arc will once again put Goku in the hero role, but he honestly couldn't care less about it. Yeah, Piccolo is a worldwide threat and needs to be stopped, but more than anything, Goku just wants to avenge his loved ones. He's entirely driven by his desire for revenge here, and this rage completely clouds his mind. He doesn't bother listening to Roshi's warning at the start, charges after Tambourine freshly off his tournament match, is fully willing to fight Piccolo again knowing he'll lose, and even gambles his own life on a potential poison just to have a fighting chance. He's acting completely off his own emotions here. It grants him great strength and he ultimately wins, yeah, but it nearly costs him multiple times throughout. Moving forward, he'll need to be more thoughtful of his actions and not let his desires completely cloud his judgment, which is exactly what Kami and Popo end up teaching him. Their training is entirely about clearing one's mind and internalizing the world around you to be as efficient as possible. This is obviously the next big step in his martial arts training, but is also something he'll carry with him in spirit as well, which we'll see more of later on. The 23rd Budokai is where Goku's growth as a martial artist finally reaches its conclusion, and it's done in an incredibly tremendous fashion. From his very first fight, we're able to see just how much Kami's training shaped him. His heart is completely still, and he takes out King Chappa in an even more efficient way than he did in the 22nd Budokai, defeating him with one quick blow. His fights against Tenshinhan and Piccolo would also show us how much he's grown. The level of skill and refinement he has here is leagues above his 22nd self, and after all of his trials, all of his teachings, and all of his hard work, he finally does it. He wins the Tenkaichi Budokai and proves himself a master of his craft. That isn't all, however. With the narrative finally hitting the climax of Goku's martial arts journey, his duality will begin to take more of a focus. Sure, he knows the dangers of letting Piccolo win, but he also wants to fight in this tournament fair and square. This is the first time Goku's love for fighting has ever clashed with his duty to do good, and while his pride as a martial artist takes hold here, winning the Budokai will mean saving the world anyways, right? As we've established, Goku's always willing to do the right thing, but that doesn't mean he'll completely forgo his own desires as a result. If he can't accomplish both, he will, and he isn't doing it thoughtlessly either. It's a risky play, sure, but he understands the dangers at hand and is fully confident in his own abilities, which in the end proves right to be. The same is true when he decides to let Piccolo live. He wants to fight him again, sure, but that isn't his sole reason for doing it. He wants to keep Kami alive and also keep the Dragon Balls. He's fully aware of the consequences but understands the benefits as well and believes that as long as he's stronger, there's no reason to worry, which in regards to Piccolo, he'll be right about as well. By the end, he was able to make the best of both worlds, but this balancing act will only get harder and more personal from here. The Saiyans are interesting in relation to Goku because they essentially represent his love for fighting but taken to its ultimate extreme. They don't just love fighting, they live for it, relish in it, so much so that they slaughter entire planets just to satiate this desire. They're genuine fighting maniacs, and when given the chance to join, Goku rejects them. He loves to fight, sure, but to value that above all else and forgo everything he's gained right here on Earth? He couldn't possibly do such a thing. He may have been born a Saiyan, but in his heart, where it counts, he's an Earthling, plain and simple. And so, he fights them to protect everything he has come to know and love, doing so with the same ideology and heart he gained right here on Earth. I know some question Goku's mercy in this and the next arc since he killed so many as a kid, but remember, he didn't think much at all about his actions back then. He just thought bad guys were bad guys and didn't really consider life itself to hold any kind of inherent value. Now, Goku never acknowledges these changes himself, and the narrative never explicitly points it out, but given everything he's experienced up to this point, I'd argue it makes total sense. Not only is he more thoughtful of his actions thanks to Kami and Popo, but he's a father now too. On top of that, a villain he once thought was pure evil sacrificed himself to save his kid. With all that in mind, his decisions here are a lot more understandable. Anything's fair game when his life is on the line, but if he can spare weaker bad guys, why wouldn't he? If they cause trouble, he can just beat them up again. With enough time, they might even change for the better, just like Piccolo did. Right? Well, we'll get back to that. Moving on to his fight with Vegeta, Goku starts to realize something. Vegeta is outclassing him in practically every way, and he honestly doesn't know if he can win. But weirdly enough, he's getting excited. He does barely pull through thanks to his friends, but before Krillin can give the killing blow, Goku asks to spare him. Now, I want to make this clear. This isn't Goku being merciful. He spared a ruthless killer like Nappa and has a good heart, yes, but he's also realistic. He knows just how dangerous Vegeta is and knows that the next time they meet, he won't just suddenly have a change of heart. This isn't about mercy, he's just being selfish. This decision is entirely driven by the same desire he had when he let Piccolo go. But unlike that instance, there's no apparent benefits here and his future victory is a lot less assured. He's gambling the fate of the world on a rematch against a monster he was completely dominated by. It's an absolutely insane request, he fully acknowledges that. But regardless of any kind of logic, this is something he personally needs. Goku is a tried and true Earthling. He spent this entire arc proving that. But it's here where he begins to realize his Saiyan influences. He's not just a Saiyan by blood, but in spirit as well, and what exactly that means in relation to him is what he'll come to understand in the next arc. Arriving on Namek, Goku continues to do his thing. He's still incredibly calm, still only does what's necessary, and still spares weaker opponents. It works pretty well for him against the Ginyu Force, but not so much against Ginyu himself. Had he gone in for the kill when he could have, he wouldn't have gotten his body taken and nearly died. I suppose he benefits from this in the long run because of the Zenkai boost, but that's all thanks to his Saiyan blood. The narrative really hammers home just how beneficial his Saiyan nature is for him here, and if he truly internalized it as a part of himself, he could really become something great. Even after this incident, though, he continues to stick firmly to his earthly ideals and calm heart. Vegeta's death would have him come to respect and connect with his Saiyan side more, but even then, respecting them isn't the same as truly being one of them. He needs to give in to his Saiyan self, his rage, bloodlust, and desire for combat. He needs to succumb to these feelings. And when Frieza kills Krillin, he finally does. For all this time, Goku didn't really know what to make of his Saiyan self. It was a part of him, yes, but what exactly did that mean? Did it mean becoming a monster like Vegeta? Did it mean discarding everything he was taught and raised to be? If so, he'd reject it. He may understand the thrill of a good fight, but to fully give in to those desires and let go of his earthly teachings and good heart, he could never do that. The thing is, however, he didn't have to. He can do both, and when he becomes a Super Saiyan, he does exactly that. It's hard to control, but ultimately he's able to retain his pure heart and sound mind, while still giving in to his Saiyan instincts and rage-filled emotions. He didn't discard anything. Somehow he was able to reconcile these two seemingly contradictory elements and found his own personal center, once again making the best of both worlds, but this time within his own soul, to literally become the best of his two worlds and truly discover himself. Which is why he states his identity so emphatically to Frieza. He doesn't say it meaninglessly and he doesn't say it ignorantly. No, he says it with confidence and pride. He is a Saiyan from Earth, Son Goku, the Super Saiyan. With this personal achievement, he's able to conquer the unconquerable Frieza, and like with every other villain he's beaten handily, tries to spare him. Now, Goku doesn't know if Frieza will genuinely change for the better, but the possibility is there and he wants to hold out hope. He might be partially driven to fight him again, after all that's what he did with Vegeta, but I don't think Goku's good heart should be understated here. Sure, he let Vegeta go out of selfish intent, but had he beaten him the same way he did Nappa, would he have really killed him? I guess it could be argued, but given everyone else, I don't think he would have. Goku really wanted to believe in the idea that even the worst villains could change for the better, and that it'd be okay as long as he was stronger. But Frieza just proves that all wrong. It doesn't matter how much stronger Goku is or how many times he helps them. People like Frieza will never change and will only try to stab him while his back is turned. Frieza isn't the first to take advantage of Goku's mercy, but he is the first to show him just how far they're willing to go. Even if they have nothing to gain, even if they'll just doom themselves along with you, they won't stop and they won't get better. They need to be taken down. It's a terribly sad realization for him, but unlike Frieza, he'll learn and grow from it. Post-Namek Goku is a little difficult to discuss. His dual nature will of course stick around till the very end, but will no longer be the focus, which makes sense. After fully internalizing both sides of himself, there really isn't any need to continue giving his duality the limelight. So what does this mean for Goku? Well, his personal journey may be over, but the next generation is just starting up. As such, he'll begin to understand his place in their lives and will take a more supportive role. The Cell arc is a bit funny when it comes to this whole next generation thing, because starting off, it appears as if it's about Goku confronting his past, but in actuality, it's about his future. Goku is Earth's greatest hero, but if he isn't around, how good off is the Earth? He doesn't think about this much at the start of the arc and treats the new threat like another wall to climb, but after recovering from his heart virus, his priorities change slightly. He's still going to train his own butt off to save the world, but now he'll be giving Gohan a lot more attention. Sure, Gohan failed in Trunks' timeline, but in theirs he still has his father and the perfect place to train. Lucky for Gohan, Goku is a good mentor. He walks him through the basics step by step, and unlike Vegeta, keeps his son from falling into any potential pitfalls. He does an amazing job here and is fully ready to pass the torch, which is a good thing. He understands his own limitations and is able to realize just how capable this newer generation is. He's right to do this, but may be undermining his own importance in the process. Yes, Gohan is capable of defeating Cell, but at the end of the day, he's still a kid. Not a wild child like Goku either, just a regular, insecure kid. One who needs support, encouragement, and guidance. Goku mistakenly assumed his son would handle things the same way he would, which is why he was so hands-off after training him, and this was a bad call. He does pay for this mistake and make up for it by the end by encouraging Gohan in the final beam struggle. However, his decision to stay dead shows that he's still undermining himself, and the effects of this action will bleed into the next arc. The Buu arc is interesting in relation to Goku because the problem at hand here kind of extends beyond the character. He is at fault here, but for the decision he made 7 years ago. Without him, this newer generation is incredibly lost. Gohan may have overcome his own self-doubt after Cell, but has now become complacent. Goten, meanwhile, doesn't know how to utilize his power. This is what I find so interesting. Goku stayed dead with the best of intentions, but regardless of his intent, the consequences of that decision would still manifest. This newer generation is still lost, and there's not much Goku can offer them in the state that he's in, aside from some new techniques and some faith. The problem, though, is that this issue isn't something that can be resolved through some special technique or new form. It's a problem that goes beyond that, and is a lot more fundamental. Even if they defeat Buu, the kids are still left pretty directionless, and if another powerful new foe appears, what then? How are the kids going to respond? That's the real issue at hand within this arc. Earth needs a proper new defender, and gaining it isn't something that can be done so quickly and easily. Overcoming this will require a lot of time, trust, and guidance. That's the real solution here. Goku's right to believe in this next generation, but the more he undermines himself, the more damage it'll cause them. There's a lot of problems and missteps these kids can fall into without his help, and he needs to recognize that. He needs to realize his own importance and be there for them, which he thankfully does by the end of the arc. His kids aren't naturally inclined to train, but he still does his best without being overbearing or controlling. And when Oob shows up, his perfect opportunity arrives. Oob is brimming with potential, and unlike Gohan or Goten, actually likes to fight, meaning he'll be a lot more serious about his training, which is why Goku takes the matter seriously in return and chooses to primarily live with him. This is his big chance to give Earth its next best defender, and he absolutely won't waste it. Like his various masters did for him, Goku will now train Oob to be the best he can possibly be, no matter how long it takes. And with that, Goku has finally come full circle, thus concluding his story. With all this being said, why is it then that Goku's character is constantly undermined by so many? Well, aside from various adaptations and sequels simplifying the character, I think there are two main reasons for this. The first is that change comes very naturally to Goku. If he sees any personal problems he needs to overcome, he'll quickly acknowledge them and work to better himself. As such, people don't really acknowledge his development as genuine, but that isn't true. He doesn't brood or complain about it, but regardless, he still grows thanks to those around him. The Budokai showcase that clearly. If it weren't for Muten Roshi, Karin, or Kami, he wouldn't have been such a refined and serious martial artist. He probably would have just goofed off otherwise. The Saiyan and Namek arcs are also good examples of this as well. If he's a Saiyan, then he's a Saiyan. He's not going to deny facts or get super angsty about it, but that doesn't mean he isn't going to struggle with it and stay the same. Truly understanding and internalizing his Saiyan self in relation to his earthly heart is his struggle here and how he changes. The same is true for knowing when to kill villains. both of which were internal struggles that were resolved thanks to Vegeta and Frieza. His core character traits may stay the same, but how they develop as his story goes on is where his growth and intrigue as a character lies. That's been the case ever since he left with Bulma on their first quest. The second reason I think people undermine his character is because of his clashing duality. Since his warrior spirit conflicts with his sense of heroism later on, it can lead some to downplay one side in favor of the other. As I've explained, however, both are important, and trying to find the right balance between the two as his worldview grows and changes is what Goku is all about, which, as we've seen over the course of the story, is expounded on in a variety of ways. When he's too emotional, he's taught to be more thoughtful. When he's too merciful, he's pushed to harden his heart. Whether it's his desires versus his responsibility or his nature versus his nurture, his final answer has always lied in the middle. Why? Because both are vital to who he is, and he didn't need to choose one over the other. The two may conflict, but they can coexist. Trying to find the right balance was difficult for him, and catering to both obviously came with its own risks and dangers. But he was always able to make it work, and came out of it all a stronger and more fulfilled person, ultimately ending the series with Earth's future safety assured and as happy as he's ever been, which is incredibly charming and inspiring. Doing what's right and fulfilling your responsibilities requires personal sacrifice, yes, but there is room for you to be happy and to be yourself, and you should always strive to find it. This will obviously vary from person to person, but it's a good message to keep in mind regardless. It's for all these reasons that I love Goku's character as much as I do. Granted, these themes are shared with a number of characters in the cast, and they're all handled wonderfully. But being honest, none of them are as well explored or as well fleshed out as Goku is. I mean, he is the main character after all. The way these ideas are executed with everyone else is different though, and I don't mean to downplay their characters. I just wanted to show why Goku is a lot more complex than most give him credit for. As always, I hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.